The senator from Blackhawk, Senator Dotzler, you are in order.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. I've heard a lot today about issues in the national election that were unsubstantiated. And I also heard the statement that a good number of my Republican friends in this chamber believe that. And I was kind of shocked to hear that. I know that my fellow colleagues are intelligent people, and I'm sorry if they've been misinformed to that extent. You know, Mark Twain once said, it's easy to fool people, but it's a lot harder to convince them they've been fooled. So this is kind of to you maybe. Just because you believe something doesn't make it true. That's got to have facts behind it. And it was pretty clear, and we've heard from many my colleagues on my side of the aisle, that if those allegations were true, why didn't the lawyers that were trying to litigate this stuff provide some cases that the courts could look at? And it wasn't Democratic courts. We all know that our former president have appointed more people to the courts than probably anybody, any president in recent years, using his litmus test. So we're talking about these elections. The last election, it's an easy to vote. It's been a record election. Well, I think this bill is going to change that. And I don't think the public is buying what is coming out of this chamber. You know, my local paper, and I wouldn't call it a liberal paper, the Waterloo Courier said, record election spurs backlash in voting. A record election got you upset enough that you got to change the laws, and it goes through the whole thing about the GOP moves to make Iowa's voting period among the shortest in the U.S. Well, we added a couple days, but that really doesn't make that big a difference when you figure about the time you take to request it, how soon you got to get it mailed in. And in case you have forgot, was this last election, the President of the United States decided to get rid of sorting machines all over the country. And in Blackhawk County, they pulled them out of there. And we were told to make sure that it was more than a week if you mailed something in my own town to me. It used to be I could mail it the night before and I'd get it the next day. Somebody in my town would get it the next day. In fact, you could mail something from Des Moines in the evening before they picked them up, and it'd be in Waterloo the next day. Well, we know that ain't true anymore. You got to have a week. And you're no longer using the proof that said that I did the right thing and mailed it a week ahead of time. If it didn't make it there in time, you throw that ballot out. You forget about the postmark or any proof that it was mailed early. Well, even without the pandemic, we know things like that happen. I used to be the editor of our local newspaper for my labor union, and I'd have to go mail these letters out once a month. And I'd get these big mail bags. And several times in the bag was mail that was supposed to be delivered to somebody, including bills and other items that had been in there for a couple of weeks. They didn't get mailed. So what happens to me, who tried to do the right thing, a person who's a veteran that served my country, believes that veterans and patriots have stood up and fought for the right to vote in this country, that if that got held up not because of my fault, but because of somebody else's, you're throwing my vote out. Now that stinks. And I got to believe you think that too. I got to believe it. Now, I know a lot of you aren't paying attention because you don't want to hear this. You guys have already made your mind up, and I'm not really talking to you anymore. I'm talking to those people that are watching us right now. And they're not happy. They're not happy. It is voter suppression when you plug up the system that comes on election day that you have long lines out the door. You know how you get a long line? I missed voting the last time because something happened and you purged that. So I go and vote, and you're going, well, Bill, you're not registered to vote. Well, yeah, I am. I voted the last 6 or 7 elections. I just missed the last one. Oh, well, here, you can fill this out. And while I'm arguing with them, people who might have limited time to vote are standing out there in long lines. Now, we had record turnout because people didn't have to stand in lines. They were energized to vote. They knew that if I got my ballot and mailed it in, I didn't have to get in my car, drive somewhere, stand in line, and go through that hassle. I could vote. Well, congratulations. You have shrunk that time. Record election spurs backlash on early voting. Now, I've heard that we're going to punish those auditors who didn't follow the law, and now we're going to make a law that's going to punish everybody if they make some simple mistake. You know, my auditor is one of the best in Iowa, and is recognized as one of the fairest in Iowa. And actually, to my chagrin, at times he's just too open and too honest about stuff, but that's who he is. And he basically says that language in there about if you make a mistake and don't perform what's called your sense of duty, and I know you've cleared up a little bit of that, then he could be fined a considerable amount. Now, why would somebody want to run for an office when they know that they could have a major fine that is because of something that happened in their office maybe they didn't have control of? And you know, auditors got to deal with a whole litany of different people. It isn't just him or her. They've got a lot of people working underneath them. What if they make a mistake? The other thing that concerns me is about this compressed time of everything. You know how hard it is to get volunteers to work elections? We can't hardly get them, and during the pandemic, you couldn't even find people that were willing to sit in a public venue in my community to deal with that. We had a few, but most of them are seniors. They're retirees. They want to stand up for their civic duty and make sure that they take care of voting, you know, and help out. Well, what happens if you don't have that availability? You got to vote by mail. And it worked. It worked like it never has before. But what happens to the next pandemic? And you don't think we're ever going to have another one? We're not done with this one yet. The next virus that evolves out of this coronavirus could be the one that'd be the death of us all. But we don't have any concern about that, and that's a different issue. But they're out there, and it's going to keep happening. The other thing that I'm concerned about is shortening the hours. You know, I was a shift worker. I went to work in the morning, got off normally at 3 o'clock, but the company had the right to keep me over. 4 hours if needed, and maybe more. You know, there are a lot of people that are 9-to-5 workers that are in that same situation. So if they get held over at 4 hours, and they get off at 5, guess what time it is? You know, the other thing is the elderly. You know, you're saying only the family members can take care of that, bring that in, except for the person. Well, I got news for you. There are a lot of elderly that have their wits about them, that their family don't give a hoot about them, and they stick them in a nursing home and forget about them. I know that for a fact because when I was in college and doing pre-med, I worked in 2 nursing homes here in Iowa, and I had to read a Christmas card to a gentleman who dearly loved his family, and they said, "Well, I'm sorry, Dad, we can't make it to Christmas this year." And I thought, well, maybe they're, out in the East Coast or California or down to Arizona. They're 20 miles away. 20 miles. And you're making a demand on a senior who might not be able to even walk, that might have had a stroke, that their family has to be there for them when they don't really care. Shame on you. Shame on you. Record election spurs backlash on early voting. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. Because as populations drift from rural areas, they move to urban areas. And we're seeing a large influx of workers in meatpacking plants. And they're eventually going to become citizens. And populations increase. And what better way to stop people from voting is to make sure they got to wait in a long line. And it's all done because of some big lie somewhere about how corrupt our elections are. And I've heard from my fellow senators about how you won about everything. We had a short election there. I bet you didn't have 78% turnout on your election. Why are we doing this? What are you afraid of? You afraid that in the future elections you're going to be called to the truth about what's going on during the campaign? I've seen a lot of stuff that stinks around here, and this is right up there on the very top of it. When you start affecting seniors, people with disabilities, shift workers, people who might not have the ability to get to a poll because of other commitments, shortening down the period of time in which a ballot can be sent, and discounting, throwing out their right that people have fought and died for in this country to have their vote counted because maybe the post office didn't get it there in time. I can't believe it. I just can't believe you're willing to take that kind of vote. It's a sad day for the Iowa Senate.